In other news now, South Africa is losing more farmers as food growing challenges bite. The Competition Commission has compiled a series of reports to monitor essential food pricing. The latest focuses on the impact of COVID-19 on food markets. The Commission says there's been a notable drop in farmers since the start of the pandemic, and especially small-scale farmers that remain are struggling. To discuss, we're joined by Chief Economist at the Commission, James Hodge. Mr. Hodge, thank you for being with us. I remember COVID came along and there were huge concerns about retail, especially, normal shopping kind of closed, but everybody needs to eat. And I recall some food sales going up at one point. Just explain why there's been a negative impact on farming because of COVID-19 and what you're seeing.
Well, I think the negative impact we've seen on farming is more of a longer-term trend. So what we identify in the report is that over almost a 5-year period, we're seeing a huge loss in the number of farmers. And that really is that the agricultural industry is not friendly to small-scale farming. It favors very large, extremely industrial farming methods, which are probably less good for the environment, but also is a product of the market structure of agriculture. You've got heavily concentrated input supplies of fertilizers, seeds, pesticides, etc. And then you've got very concentrated buyers of the output, being your retailers, your national grocery retailers, or just your processors and millers. So farmers are squeezed from both sides. So we're seeing large numbers of exit of smaller farmers. Production's still increasing, but it's done by increasingly fewer and much, much larger farming. And we don't think that's great, especially in a pandemic, because you almost need, households are losing jobs. Food is an important part of nutrition and development. And so small-scale farming can actually plug a gap. And that's why it's important that we encourage it.
Has COVID-19 exacerbated the overall trend, though, that you're talking about?
Look, I think COVID-19 has exacerbated the food crisis more broadly, and which has brought into sharp focus almost problems in the food chain that are impacting daily on people's lives. So as people lose jobs, lose income, you either have to cut back on nutritional foods or eat less, and that does hurt families on the borderline. And so what we have also seen during COVID is much higher price inflation as well of food. So you mentioned the sort of panic buying and price gouging we saw in the beginning of lockdown level 5. But following that, there have been sporadic sort of price gouging and panic buying in some of the waves. But overall price inflation has grown, and that is partly because supply chains globally have got disrupted. Countries have closed their borders to the export of certain products, or they're just restocking for their own food security. So our link to the global economy has meant we face much higher price inflation.
However, you do note something positive, that when imports become very expensive or there's blocked borders because of COVID-19, the move is to buy local. So you would think that would help local farmers, but seemingly not enough, or could we see some benefits there down the line?
I think what we're seeing is that trend is emerging globally, and it's driven by, I suppose, the pandemic, but also driven by an awareness now about climate change. That the pandemic suddenly made us aware that our food is coming from all over the globe with quite a large carbon footprint. We do need more of that domestically, but we also need other ways of encouraging small-scale farming. So the Very Buy Local initiative actually does support small-scale farming, because what it does is, within a community, local farmers supply local consumers for certain products. We'll always have to import, and we'll always have big farmers, but a better balance would see, much shorter supply chains, much more sustainable farming, and creating livelihoods in communities, both urban and rural. So small-scale farming can provide that, and it can be competitive because you're not shipping things across the globe with all the energy and
Mr. Hodge, you muted by mistake there, so we didn't catch the end of that. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Sorry,
Okay.
I think my
no problem. I'm going to throw in one
But-
last question before we wrap up, because you spoke about that long-term trend, and it's very interesting. You say that dairy farmers alone have dropped by more than 2/3 over the last 14 years. So it seems like we're just losing farmers left, right, and centre. Then you explained that actually we're still producing a lot of dairy or whatever. It's just now concentrated, less owners on these big farms. My question to you is, what does that mean for food security? We've seen, especially in COVID-19, that you need enough farmers making food for your population. You need to know that you're covered if things go wrong. Where do we stand in terms of food security, and what do the trends say in terms of that?
So we're going to need large farmers and even trade to promote food security. But at a household level, that needs to be supplemented by local agriculture and production, where households can produce for themselves, or small-scale farmers can feed their community at much lower cost. So I think from a food security perspective, we need to have a mind shift from just maybe bailouts and government grants to help people afford food, to actually allowing communities to produce and provide security for their own needs. And that's probably the shift that COVID-19 has brought, and the focus is brought for us.
All right, thank you very much, Chief Economist at the Competition Commission, James Hodge, and we'll see what bright ideas emerge in terms of supporting those small-scale farmers.